Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Clara Amfo, and it is my absolute pleasure to be with you this evening to be involved with this Q&A with an incredible woman by the name of Drew Dixon. Now, Drew is the subject of a new documentary called On the Record, which is available in the UK and Ireland on all digital platforms. It's truly a brilliant piece of work. It is brutal, it is brave, and it is vital. And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with her this evening. I know that lots of you guys have got questions for her. If you want to keep those coming through, please send them to @dogwoof. That's dog like DOGWOOF, with the hashtag AskDrew. So that's @dogwoof with hashtag AskDrew for any questions you may have for this brilliant woman. And without further ado, here she is, Drew Dixon. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for creating space for this conversation. And thank you for taking time to watch the film.
Absolutely. Look, Drew, you describe yourself very correctly as a writer, a producer, and I think most importantly, a silence breaker.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a silence breaker. I certainly never thought that I would be. I spent 2 decades trying not to be, but ultimately I felt like it was incumbent upon me to come forward. And so here I am.
Here you are. I mean, look, we're now in 2020, but I want to take it back to 1995 or even like 1992 when you really started getting into the industry. I mean, we speak a lot these days in Gen Z chat. Current mood. What was your mood in 92? Who was young Drew?
Oh, wow. Young Drew was, about that life, and that life was hip hop. I just believed that hip hop was going to change the world. I believed that it spoke for the sort of unseen, really kind of the original silence breakers. Rappers were like America's sort of silence breakers back in the 80s and the 90s, telling a story, shining a light on their experience in a way that was invisible in the mainstream culture and in a way that was sort of, polished into the corners of mainstream pop music. And it was raw, it was honest, it was daring, it was soulful, it was woke before woke was a thing. And it was gritty. Some of it was tough to listen to. It was nerdy because it was really lyric heavy. It was sort of dense lyrically, and there were lots of like punchlines, and it was wordplay, and it was clever. And I really thought that an ear and sort of an vision about what artists and what music could be great and could sort of be a part of that conversation, but maybe with a slightly different perspective. I don't think I understood it explicitly as a 21-year-old woman when I first started answering phones, but that I was going to bring a perspective as a woman and as a Black woman that was different. And even now I realize that the first record that I really helped to make, which was the duet with Mary J. Blige and Method Man, I'll Be There For You, You're All I Need, which was my idea. I don't know that any other than a woman would have thought of that. I mean, I was moved by that as a woman, keeping it extra real. I was dating D'Angelo at the time. And he hadn't put out his album yet. And I was. And so when I heard Method Man say, "Shorty, I'm there for you anytime you need me, and for real, go to me in your world, believe me, that makes a man feel better than a woman, queen with a crown, up and down for whatever," that as an interlude, I was like, whoa, he is saying what every woman that's in love with a guy who's like a hip hop head wants to hear, but we want to hear it like that. We don't necessarily want to hear "I need love" like LL Cool J said it. We want to hear it like that. Say it like that. Mm-hmm. Say it in the vocabulary and the cadence of hip hop. And I just thought if it were only an interlude, it would get lost and no one would hear it. So then I was like, Russell, what if we make it a duet with Mary and make it a whole record as a remix, even though the album is done? And that way people will hear this interlude, this rhyme, this love story, this love song, like an ode from Method Man to his woman. Like, how dope is that? And I don't think that anybody really, I don't think a man would ever have had that idea. And I didn't even appreciate that until I saw the film, honestly. That me thinking of that was an example of why it matters for women to be in the room.
Absolutely. And you know, it's so bittersweet how a woman's voice is so valid in the music industry, but then also how a woman's voice can be silenced in the industry, as we've learned in this documentary. I mean, when I was telling friends of mine that I was going to be interviewing you, they were so excited. And a friend of mine called Liana, she messaged me saying this: Drew is literally an icon. She was responsible for so much that we love about hip hop. And imagine, I've never heard of her. So how does it make you feel to, I mean, what feelings does it bring up to hear yourself be described in such an oxymoronic way? Like, you're an icon, because you really are. You know, the records you worked on, like Lauryn Hill, Aretha Franklin, D'Angelo, Q-Tip. You know, you had your ear on Kanye and John Legend before they became big deals. But yet, you know, we can't put a face to the name. We don't even know the name. How does it? What feeling does that bring up for you?
Well, I think women so often, you know, work behind the scenes. You know, I have kids, you know, they're a little bit older now, they're teenagers, but, you know, getting them ready in the morning, getting their hair did, you know, packing their lunch, all the stuff you do that's sort of invisible and you send them out into the world, I think is sort of emblematic of what women do so often. We do a lot of the heavy lifting, we do the work behind the scenes. You know, the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement are women, are Black
Mm-hmm.
women, but somehow the movement keeps forgetting to say her name. You know, I think that is something that women experience across the board, and I am an example of it. You know, and so I just, I don't know. It's for me personally, I thought I would take these stories and frankly my contribution to my grave. If the Me Too moment hadn't happened, I probably never would have really spoken out, not just about the bad stuff that happened to me in the industry, but the good stuff that I did in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I used to try to tell my kids, like we'd be in Urban Outfitters or some store and like the Mary Meth duet would come on, or, you know, My Love Is Your Love would come on, or something, right? Some record I helped to make. And I would bring it up and they would say, you know what, Mom, we're tired of hearing these stories. You don't know anybody. None of these people call you. You know, you say you know Kanye. We don't even have Yeezys. You know, how is this real, Mom? Like, you know, they would almost like thought I was delusional, you know, and I don't know. It's I didn't do what I did to get credit. I mean I forgot to put my name on the back of the Mary Meth duet. I was so busy making it that it never occurred to me that anyone would not give me a credit for it. It
Mm.
was literally my idea. And you know, I literally took the reels from Hit Factory where Puffy was working in the remix, rewound them and took them to Chung King where RZA was working in the remix because RZA didn't know that Puffy was already doing a remix. Like I called Puffy to get Mary J to be on it, and then he had the idea for the remix. He started it, and then Lior and Russell told RZA, and he's like, "That's a great idea. I'll do it." And then they didn't tell him, "Well, Puffy's already doing it." So I had to
Mm.
pretend there was only one remix happening and rewind the reels. I mean, the fact that they were not like they literally didn't give me credit was like mind blowing, which is why when I then did the show soundtrack, I typed the credits and I
Right on.
typed executive producers Drew Dixon and Russell Simmons. And then I was like, Russell might be mad. So then I switched the order. But you know, I did I did what I did because I wanted to hear the records. I mean, honestly, you know, as I said earlier, I was dating D'Angelo when he was making the Brown Sugar album. And at one point, this is before my Def Jam job, he was like really frustrated. His A&R guy had been hired and he bought a bus ticket to Virginia and he was going to go home. And I ripped up the ticket and I was like, you can't leave. And he was like, oh my God, I love you too. And I was like, I do love you, but honestly, I need you to finish the album. Like, I need
Okay.
to hear the album, yo. Like, it's gonna be dope. You can't leave. Like, you know, and so, you know, I did it for the love. I didn't do it to be seen. And so it is really gratifying, however, for people to remember me and for me to remember myself. That's really what the film has done. It's helped me to remember myself.
Absolutely.
who
I mean,
was.
I think the great thing about the film is that it doesn't elicit any sympathy per se. You don't seem like you're begging people to feel sorry for you, but it's about, you know, standing up and using your voice to be counted. But I think two things that you just brought up in that conversation, and I think is one of the biggest themes of the documentary, is about the erasure of Black women's voices. Not just in the industry, but just in real life. Because, you know, for a lot of people that don't know, the Me Too movement was started by a Black woman.
Right.
Tarana Burke started that,
Right.
but it wasn't until famous white women got involved that all of a sudden, you know, this pathway was sort of created for women like you to speak up. Like, how did that frustrate you?
It did frustrate me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's part of why I came forward. You know, I I didn't know that anyone would really care. It's still not clear that in the Black community anybody really does. I mean, that's something that's still happening right now with us as the Russell Simmons survivors, and the way the Black community is still very quiet about the fact that there is a serial rapist in our midst, in our community, that they sort of don't want to really call out. And knowing that Black women began our story in America on a slave auction block, not on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was very unclear to me that the Me Too movement would apply to me and to us as Black women. And then when women came forward about Russell, first it was two white women who came forward with stories that included Brett Ratner. And then after I'd gone to the New York Times off the record, Jenny Lumet went on the record with her story, and she's a Black woman. It occurred to me that the only way for Black women to be part of the Me Too movement is for Black women to be part of the Me Too movement. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like Rosa Parks had to decide to sit down on the bus, and that is what began that new sort of chapter of the civil rights movement. And
Yeah.
so I decided to sit on the Me Too bus. I decided to take a seat on the Me Too bus with Jenny Lumet to make sure that Black women were seen. And while it's been terrifying, I also understand, and the reason why I just refuse to feel sorry for myself, I am a very fortunate woman. I'm blessed. I may have lost my career and my livelihood in the area where I had the greatest sort of expertise and you know, investment of time and energy. I'm still a very fortunate woman, and I have more safety than a lot of Black women have for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And therefore, I felt like I had to use that to get on the bus and then to hold the door open with the documentary for all Black women to get on. That's really what moved me to do it. Like, I'm gonna go, kind of like Aaliyah. Is it your go? Is it my go? Okay, it's my go. I'm gonna go, but now that I'm here, let me hold the door open. And the film kind of, as this longer project with these filmmakers I really trusted, felt like an opportunity to expand the lens and include all Black women and all girls, and the way our bodily autonomy was lost at the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade. So that this wasn't just a story about white women who absolutely were harmed, and it's absolutely awful, and they are heroes of mine for breaking their silence. But I didn't want it to end with the pearl clutching around sort of white women who are already on a pedestal, however complicated and illusory that pedestal is. I wanted us to be a part of this. I wanted this to include us in the same way that I want the Black Lives Matter movement, created by Black women, but from which we've been sort of decentered, to include us. I'm tired of Black women doing all the heavy lifting. You know, frankly, whether it's my career in the music industry, to the extent that I made a contribution that's been ignored, whether it's Tarana Burke in the Me Too movement, whether it's the women in the Black Lives Matter movement, we do the heavy lifting and then we get nothing. We don't even get, we're not even a footnote in the story. We don't even get the benefit of the advocacy or the hard work. And I just hope that doesn't keep happening. I hope that we are seen and centered this time.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because I think, you know, you mentioned this in the documentary, and I think, you know, we look at the sort of systemic racism in society and the kind of the structure of power. You know, it's like it's straight white men at the top, then it's white women, and then it's probably it's black men, and then it's women of color. You know, and it was really
Right.
interesting how you are aware of your own privilege. You know, as you mentioned in the documentary, like your light skin pretty privilege to get you taxis with Redman like through New York for you to be able to speak. Because you know, recently we've seen you know the sad death of Toyin Salu, the young protester, which was just heartbreaking. You know, we've seen what's going on with Breonna Taylor, who Russell is campaigning for, which I find completely incredible. I find it so heinous that, you know, he's a serial rapist and is doing "say your name" on social media. I find that completely bizarre. But do you feel that, you know, your position, you know, as a light-skinned, you know, the pretty privileged woman in the music industry, almost gave you your foot in the door? And did you notice a difference between how your other like sisters in the industry were treated because of that as well?
So, you know, I think sort of fetishization, I've never known how to say that word exactly, but sort of a Black women in America is something that we are like unfairly sort of, there's this unfair idea that like somehow we have like power as Black women because of our reality and our swagger, but it's like this superficial power. Room to maneuver in a tiny little space, and then to be trapped if we actually try to assert ourselves with real parity and power. And having said that, I feel like in the music industry, as you described, and sort of in the entertainment industry in general, there are white men at the top, then there are white women, then there are like a few Black men that are like, you know, maybe
The
like one
gatekeepers.
Black woman, like Oprah. Like there's mostly Black men, a few Black women who are like the 5 Black people that the white people know because they go to St. Bart's in the Hamptons and can move around places where most Black people could never dream of going. And so if you can't get past them, if you don't get the kind of green light from Russell or L.A. Reid or one of those guys, then you can't ever get to the next level. And the other thing that I observed in my career is that those men like to sit around with arm candy. They like to be flanked by models. They like to be flanked by beautiful artists or background dancers or whatever. And so I actually had to like, I actually used to joke about it with Andre Harrell, who I knew well, who was actually Andre. And, you know, although I'm processing the fact that it's sort of like a low bar, that I had no issues with Andre because he was nice to me, but he was also like best friends with the guy who raped me. So that's a whole separate issue that I have to process. It's sort of like the Stockholm syndrome, like, you know, he was like the nice guy and he was like the nice prison warden. You know what I mean?
Right.
All so bad. But you know, I used to joke with him about the fact that like I had to like literally have like a budget for like my highlights and to get my eyebrows arched and, you know, keep my nails done and have like, I literally had a ponytail in my drawer at Arista in the event that, like Clive invited me at the last minute to some event. And I had like my hair, I worked out so I could like, you know, you had to kind of look a certain way for them to even invite you to sit with them at the table. And then you get at the table, and then I would try to do my job. But if I didn't get to the table, I couldn't even get their attention for 5 minutes to do my job. But to get to the table, I kind of had to look a way that would make them feel okay with me being at the table, which meant I had to have my ponytail in my desk drawer. I used to run around the office in Birkenstocks, but I had my Manolo shoes under the desk for like if I had to go out. I was like, okay, I have like 100 minutes that I can run in the like that per day in these shoes, and then it's over. I gotta go back to the Birkenstocks. But you know, I I realized that was all a trap. It was all still playing by their rules, their patriarchy, their sort of toxic game where I had to kind of fit in their box, be palatable to them in terms of my appearance. And then once I got their attention, pivot, do my job well, and then still fend off advances. I mean, and even that, I think I got the luxury of doing that because I fit in a mold that made them feel like they wanted me around. And so it's like, well, that's terrible. But what about the sister who can't even get in the room? Who can't even get to the table? Like, what about that sister? I mean, it's like all bad. You know what I mean? It's all their rules. It's all them mimicking the white toxic patriarchy. It's Animal Farm. They're just using their power against me and against all of us as women to mimic the way the white supremacist patriarchy limits their power. And so instead of being allies, Black women, and playing by a fairer set of rules, they're really kind of doing to us what is done to all of us in the broader environment. So it's not good.
It's not. Well, it's so interesting as well, like how much as women we still blame ourselves for when we do endure, any kind of inappropriate sexual behavior. When speaking about you before we got into this, and I'm sure you'll agree, as women, every single time we walk out the door, we are acutely aware of the threat of someone trying to violate us.
Of course. Always. I mean, always. I mean, right. I mean, like, even like, like TaskRabbit or Handy, like these services where you can get somebody to come in and hang up painting, or, I'm always like, okay, I mean, I hope this person is safe. I mean, they're coming through Handy. I'm home alone. I prop the door open. I try to tell a friend. It's like, whenever they come in their house and hang a painting or fix a leaky pipe, and also walking down the street and, making sure you don't walk down the poorly lit street, or being in the subway car alone all of a sudden because everybody gets off. We think about that all the time. But the other thing that I want people to think about that I didn't think about in 1995 is, by and large, your attacker is not going to be the guy with a switchblade in the dark alley. It's not going to be the guy coming to hang the painting who randomly exploits the fact that you're home alone. I'm sure that dude is thinking about getting on to his next job. He's not thinking about you. It's the guy who is a predator, who is sophisticated, who grooms you over time. The vast majority of sexual assault is acquaintance based. And that is something I did not understand. I knew Russell Simmons was appropriate. I thought he was sort of like a poorly behaved ADD puppy dog, which is what I say in the film. And I could just redirect him and he would be sort of contrite. I did not know that if he had 5 minutes alone with me where no one could hear me scream, he was violent and was an actual rapist. When I got in that elevator thinking I was going to pick up a CD while a car was on its way to come get me, and I really thought that was my ticking clock somehow. And that would be my like worst case scenario. The car's here, I gotta go. I didn't understand that again, this like shadowy figure with a switchblade in an alley is not in all likely you need to worry about. It's the guy in the penthouse who's your boss, who's been casing you and gaslighting you and hitting you and wearing you down, and who set a trap. And that's what I want people to understand so they can try to be safer. But one thing I also want to say is it's not really our job as women to figure out how to not get raped any more than it is my son's job, who is 13, who is a Black boy, who I have already had the talk with about what to do if he encounters the police. George Floyd did everything right. Philando Castile did everything right. The truth is I did everything right. I've relived that night for 24 years now. I had a million ways to avoid being alone with Russell, and I let my guard down for 5 minutes to pick up a CD because I heard him order the car and thought that I was cleverly not going to stay and listen to the CD and I would take it with me. And, you know, the bottom line is there's really nothing that George Floyd could have done differently, and there's really nothing that I could have done differently. A racist, violent police officer or white vigilante like the men who killed Ahmaud Arbery, or a rapist like Russell Simmons are going to do what they're going to do no matter what their victim does. It's not about us being more respectable as Black people. It's not about us dressing a certain way as women. It's about them not being abusers, and it's about our society not creating space that allows them to get away with it.
Absolutely. And that brings you on to my next question, which is actually one from one of the audience members, a wonderful woman by the name of Whitney Boateng, who is a supernova in the industry. Young, I know you've been to Ghana before. Young Ghanaian music exec, she's incredible. Whitney says, do you feel that men in the music industry need to be educated about sexual abuse and, you know, and just what is appropriate and consent?
Absolutely. Yes, I do, Whitney. Thank you for your work and thank you for your question. Yes, the onus is on the people with the power. The onus is on the men not to laugh off the quote unquote locker room talk when there's one young woman in the room at the meeting and you're making these body jokes or you're laughing along with these body jokes because you're sending a signal to her that she doesn't matter. You're sending a signal to her that this is not a safe space and that if she wants to succeed professionally, she has to suck it up. Well, if she's going to suck it up in a meeting in a room with a bunch of guys and a nice guy like you, then I promise you the things she's going to have to tolerate and work around when you're not around are worse. And she's going to think she has to because you didn't, as a man, speak up in a room where you could have made a difference for her. It's the same way that the N-word is violence. It's the same way that violent because it creates a space that incubates violent behavior, systemic racism with economic consequences that happen in the same room where the N-word is used, where racist jokes are used. They're not a joke. It's not a joke. So if you play along and think you're innocent, you are not innocent. You are part of the problem, and the men need to step up. And I'm so disappointed in the men in the industry who have been deafeningly silent. Men that I know, men who I thought were my friends, Black men have been so overwhelmingly silent. There are a few that have spoken out. Fred Joseph, Michael Arsenault, Jimmy Briggs, I want to shout them out. You know, they're all
spoke out.
What's that?
I saw John Legend spoke out, which
John
is really
Legend, yes, I'm so grateful. You know, but it's really the vast majority have said nothing. I haven't heard from them, you know, and there's some that have reached out to me privately in public settings. They act like I'm not there. There's one person who reached out to me the day the New York Times came out. I thought he was an ally. I went on an Instagram live. I said hello, no response. I said hello again, no response. And then I realized Uncle Rush was in the building and he shouted out Uncle Rush. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. So you are with me as long as nobody sees you being with me. Well, guess what? That's how women get caught in this spider web. That's how we get caught, because you don't want to stick your neck out and say, not on my watch. You won't say things like that and do things like that and put this woman in a corner, in a corner, in a corner, in a corner until the only way she could do her job is to meet Russell Simmons in a car and play demos in a car because nobody in the office will stick up for her. And now here she is picking up a demo at his apartment. Actually, I thought I might be going to his home office, which was in the same building, when he said, come upstairs and get the demo. But I've normalized this sort of unorthodox working style with this man who was inappropriate with me already because I have no other options, because there's no men in the building where I work. The good guys, you know, Frank Cooper was a lawyer. He worked with me on the soundtrack. I haven't heard from him. You know, there's a brother, Gary Watson, who's in the movie. I'm so grateful to him. He was a lawyer who worked in the film, who spoke out for me, who stepped up and is in the film. And I'm so grateful. He is the exception.
Mm.
Gary, Daddy-O, Miguel, the three black men in the movie, are the exception. There were many black men who knew me in my career who were asked to do this film who declined. They don't
Wow.
want to touch it. And that is how we get caught. We're out here telling white people to speak out, do their part. We can't solve racism. We didn't create it. The structure that makes it dangerous. I'm upset about the racism that hurts. I'm upset about the racism that gets my brothers and my sisters killed. I'm
Mm-hmm.
upset about the racism that gets my brothers and locked up. I'm upset about the racism that keeps my brothers and sisters poor and disadvantaged and disenfranchised. But if you are calling on white people to solve the structural problem of racism, and then you as a black man are silent about the structural problems of misogyny that are getting your sisters raped,
Mm.
and in the case of Toyin, killed. I'm sorry, I don't understand how you don't see the connection between the Confederate statues of men who raped our ancestors that you want torn down and taken off a pedestal and not propped up, and Russell Simmons, who is a living, breathing rapist, not of your ancestors, but of your living, breathing sisters right now, and you're
Mm.
propping him up on a pedestal. And that's okay, but you want to take the rapist from 200 years ago down? What about the rapist right now? Why is he okay? Why is he on your show?
Yeah, and it's absolutely, it's quite I'd like to say it's surprising, but it's not. You know, that fraternity of protection. It's, you know, that those bonds are scary, because nobody wants to not be invited to a certain brunch every year. Nobody doesn't want to. People don't want to not get that invite to St. Bart's, as you say. I mean, you said in the documentary that you didn't want to be radioactive. That's why you didn't speak up. You said, I loved Russell. I took it for the team because I love the culture. But, you know, when the culture doesn't love you back after what you've put into it, like, you get silenced. We've had a question from a woman called Fisayo, and she says, what advice would you give to women who are too afraid to speak up, in or outside of the industry?
Right. Thank you for your question. And I understand being afraid to speak out. It took me 22 years to speak out. You know, one thing I did discover, I will say this. I was asked at a forum in February whether or not I was afraid that I would now forever be known as the woman who was raped by Russell Simmons, and if that was one of the reasons I hadn't come forward. And I realized in the moment she asked the question that, yes, that is one of the reasons I didn't speak out, but I'm not that woman anymore because I did speak out. The 20 years that I spent avoiding being that woman, I was defined by being the woman who was raped by Russell Simmons, who was afraid of being known as the woman who was raped by Russell Simmons. Once I spoke out, I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I'm not afraid of him anymore. I'm not afraid of a Google search term. I may be that woman to you. You're Googling me and you know Drew Dixon is the woman who was raped by Russell Simmons. I'm not that person anymore. I don't think about it. Think about it. I don't have to worry about it. I'm just Drew Dixon. So maybe the world now sees me that way, but I don't make any choices anymore in my life about making sure the world doesn't see me that way. So I freed myself from the fear of coming forward and the fear of being known this way by just getting it over with. Now it's y'all's problem. And I don't mean you personally, but it's somebody else's problem. If they Google me and that's how they know me, that's how they know me. But it's not how I know myself anymore. You know, it's like a coloring book. I was coloring in these tiny little lines to avoid being exposed as Russell Simmons' rape victim. And now I color on the whole page. I have the whole page. I have the whole notebook now. Because I don't have to be afraid anymore. So I guess I would say take your time. I took 22 years, but I hope you will tell yourself, allow yourself to be a victim and a survivor and a warrior. Don't skip the victim part. I'm still a victim. Have let yourself grieve, give your victim self some space. Don't try to just skip to the warrior part, the survivor part. Be all three, but try to find a way to tell yourself and to tell somebody. Because again, I keep going back to these Confederate statues, walking around in a world where you've got to pretend that this person who harmed you is okay with the New York Times, but maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's a cousin, maybe it's your stepdad or your mom's boyfriend, and you've got to make yourself small at Thanksgiving and Christmas and holidays. And that's not any better than walking around Confederate statues. It all makes you small. And I don't want you to be small because of something somebody did to you. And I guess the last thing I would say is you think about coming forward. I thought that by telling my story, I would be giving the world information and I would get back on with my life and it wouldn't change my life. What I didn't understand is that I hadn't processed it at all. And suddenly being public about being a rape victim forced me to have to integrate that into my identity. And I discovered that in this box that I'd buried, like in the basement of my soul, with the pain, there was all this beauty in that box that I needed. There was my swagger. There was that 24-year-old girl who came to New York City knowing she could make records and be a mogul and wasn't going to let anybody tell her no. She was in the box too. The creativity was in the box too. The light was in the box. I thought I was only putting the pain in the box. If you are a rape victim or a survivor of sexual violence or harassment, I promise you there's some stuff in that box that you need. I want you to get that stuff out of the box. That's your stuff.
Well, look, as somebody who can personally relate, you're gonna make me cry, but I completely and fully understand what you're saying. I mean, final question. I mean, one of the great phrases from the doc was your colleague or your old friend Kierna, who said, "We all lose when brilliant women go away. It's a loss for all of us." But Drew, I can tell you're not going anywhere. You're back.
I'm back.
So, you're back. So I know no one's going to lose with you being back in the room. So what are your future plans? You're not going away. So where are you going?
Well, I am back. I didn't know how not back I was. I didn't know how much I'd been sleepwalking. And I am back. And I am just so excited. I'm optimistic. I just try so hard to stay optimistic. I'm working with Ella Wild, the artist that I discovered literally while they were filming me. I discovered Ella, and the song she played for me, Medicine, is now available on iTunes and Spotify. Produced by DJ Khalil, Grammy winner DJ Khalil, who happens to be my cousin. So that's up on iTunes and Spotify. I started a label just to make Ella's record called The Ninth Floor, which is the name of the floor that I worked on with Clive, where I was safe and productive. And so Ninth Floor Music is my label. I'm raising money for the Ninth Floor. I'm looking for partners. I'm looking for resources. So if anybody out there wants to help me get the Ninth Floor off the ground, I would appreciate your support. So I had an idea several years ago for a TV show, sort of exploring what it was like to be a woman in the 90s with all of these other bright, incredible, talented women and what happens when women disappear. So it's sort of like a thriller, but it explores some of the themes that I was unpacking at the time for myself, really like in therapy. And it turned into a TV show called Reciprocity that I'm developing. So I'm trying to get that done. And I'm writing a book because people keep wanting me to tell these stories that I have about what it was like to make records in the 90s. And so, I feel like I have 20 plus years of like pent up energy and creativity, and I'm trying to make up for lost time. And it's really exciting. And I'm just so grateful to be seen and remembered and heard. And I'm so touched to be asked to speak whenever I am, especially in this kind of a forum. It's so gratifying for me. And I'm also just so moved that Black women are embracing this film and seeing all of us in this story. And that's another part of what I hope to do with the rest of my life, is make sure we as Black women and girls and children, I feel strongly about Black women and children. I do, because I feel like, we are just always the last to be remembered. And unless we are whole for ourselves, I don't think we're ever going to really, truly, break the bonds of sort of structural racism. I think we've got to be healthy ourselves, and that's my mission, is to move Black women forward through my work.
Well, Drew, all I can say is that you are absolutely seen, you are absolutely heard, you are absolutely valued, and I'm just so grateful that you took this time to speak to us. For anybody who hasn't seen the documentary already, it is called On the Record, just in case you needed a reminder. It is available on all digital platforms. And actually, before you get into it, go on Spotify and check out this playlist called Drew Dixon's Impact, because the hits, a rose is still a rose, Lauren and Aretha. I mean, look, Lauren Hill is in the background of my home. That's she's on my t-shirt. That is your impact. Like the Method Man and Mary, Q-Tip, Prince. There is so much incredible work that Drew helped to form that we just don't know, but we know now. And look, that's your legacy, and you're still here. And yeah, just salute to you always, Drew. Thank you so very much.
Oh, let's keep building. Thank you.
Oh, let's keep building. See you later. Bye-bye. And thank you everybody for watching.